Hey there, How To listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later on. It's from one of our partners, SAP. AI comes at you fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Whether you're looking to automate tasks or embed AI in your business processes, SAP can help. To learn more, head to sap.com/AI and stick around for expert advice on how to embrace AI with confidence.
The IKEA Business Network is now open for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Join for free today to get access to interior design services to help you make the most of your workspace, employee well-being benefits to help you and your people grow, and amazing discounts on travel, insurance, and IKEA purchases, deliveries, and more. Take your small business to the next level when you sign up for the IKEA Business Network for free today by searching IKEA Business Network.
Welcome to How To. Hey listeners, we have a very special treat for you today. This is, believe it or not, the 5-year anniversary of How To on Slate. Can you guys believe that? Does that seem like a realistic?
That's amazing.
That's amazing. So because of that, we have a very special treat. We have a collection of an assembly of How To hosts that have never been in the room together. It is me, Carvell Wallace. It is Courtney Martin, whom you know, and it is our show's founding father, Charles Duhigg, all together to talk about what the last 5 years has been like and maybe even think a little bit about what the next 5 years might be. So thanks for joining us. And thanks, guys, for coming together here.
Yeah,
this is so much fun.
This is exciting. So I guess the first question that Courtney and I have, because we came to the show when it was already going, is, Charles, can you give us a little bit of the origin story for how this came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I had just left the New York Times and I was an investigative reporter at the Times, and I kind of had this question, which is, I love reading like Dear Abby. I love reading all those advice columns, and I was writing books that kind of gave people science-based advice. And I just thought, like, what happens if you bring the skills of investigative reporting, where we're actually talking to experts and we're asking them hard questions, and we brought that to Dear Abby? We would probably get something that not only would give you insights into how life should work and how we can best move through life, but also help you understand why those insights are true. And I think that it's that understanding that's most powerful, usually when I learn something. Mm-hmm. Which, can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So you guys have been doing this for a while now. How do you feel like you've changed as a result of being a host on this show?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think hearing about everyone's problems helps you understand your own problems better. Not just because people actually talk about the problems that you face, but because you start to get a 1,000-foot view of our sets of problems that we have, and you find that they sort of fall into the same categories. Like, it's like, how do I tell someone something that it's going to be hard for me to tell them? Or how do I believe that I can do something that it's hard for me to believe? Like, so many of the questions fall into categories like that. I think that's helped me understand that in my own life, most of the challenges I'm facing are challenges like that. Or the biggest one is like, how do I let go of something that I actually need to let go of, that I would like to control, but I can't control? How do I deal with that? So I think hosting this show and just hosting the other Slate Advice shows has helped me just like gain more perspective on my own problems.
That's really interesting.
I love that.
What about you, Courtney?
I was thinking about, I have a quotation at the end of my email that's from this like random Catholic nun that says, "Engrave this on your heart. There isn't anyone you couldn't love once you heard their story." Mm-hmm. And I feel like the show for me is a like way to live that every week, where no matter what the topic is, sometimes it's something I am actually not that interested in. I inevitably, by the end of the recording, I'm just like madly in love with a guest, and to some extent the expert. I think especially the guest, like the caller in person. So it has just deepened my belief in that. And I, like Carvell, I think noticing all the categories and that there aren't actually that many of them is kind of profound, of problems that we all have. And also, I don't know, Carvell, don't you feel like part of what we do isn't even what anyone says? It's just giving someone the attention and the like taking this moment to be like, your life is important and the thing that's you're struggling with is important.
Yeah.
Feels like that in and of itself. Like we could not even say anything that smart for an hour, but it's like the person's like, wow, I'm important enough that these like people got in a virtual room and asked me questions. Seems so special.
Well, I think that's particularly true for the problems that are about like relationships or like kind of like mushy personal emotional things. And then there's problems that are like more like when we had someone on to like learn how to breathe like a Navy SEAL. And it was like that episode was like I just used that one as an example because it was so technical. It was like first do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. So in those ones, it's like the answer was hard. Or even the comedy episode, which is the one we're going to replay today that we first heard. That one's like kind of like a how-to of comedy. So those ones I think do really have that feeling of like, it's not just getting together in the room, it's actually getting someone to tell you how to do something. But the emotional stuff, the answer is often just taking time and listening is actually the solution.
Well, and one of the things as like a listener now, because I love listening to you guys do the show. I love what you've done with the show. And one of the things that's like so inspiring just to be exposed to is the courage that often the callers bring, right? The courage to face up to a problem. Oftentimes the experts are citing their own lives and the courage that they had to have. And you guys oftentimes as hosts are bringing your own personal experiences into this and having the courage to say, here is who I am in both its beauty and its crassness. That is just inspiring because I think at the end of the day, learning is about having courage, and to watch other people have courage in such a visceral way, I think inspires us to feel a little bit braver when we're going out and trying to do things on our own.
That's awesome.
To that end, Charles, do you have a favorite episode of the last 5 years?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. There is this one episode that we did, and I want to ask you guys the same question because my guess is that a lot of it has to do with the experience of recording it as much as how the episode turned out. Right. We did this one episode with a guy who was suffering from anxiety, and a friend of mine, Ben Michaelis, who's a psychologist, came on as our expert. And we talked through where the anxiety was coming from. And this is a guy who he would have panic attacks and start sweating. And it was just completely debilitating. It wasn't just like mild anxiety. It was something that had transformed his entire life. And it had started when his daughter had passed away. And we did, and the episode is so touching. I cried, Ben cried, the caller cried. We were all sort of bawling at the end of it. And I've heard from him 3 or 4 times since we did that episode, just saying thank you. Like that, like what I learned from you guys changed my life and made things so much better. And I think at the end of the day, I know that both of you guys come from a similar place of journalism I do, where there's the kinds of journalisms that expose, what's otherwise hidden. But then there's also the kind of journalism that teaches us what we need to be human and to be the people we want to be.
Right.
And in many ways, I love exposing stuff, but hearing from someone who says, my life is better because I encountered you in this show, that's really, really meaningful.
Yeah.
But let me ask you guys, what are your favorite episodes?
You got one, Carvell?
Yeah, but I want you to go first.
Okay. It's like choosing a child, right?
Yeah,
like I can't actually choose, but we did do a recent episode on loneliness, which may be similarly to the anxiety one. It's called How to Be Lonely. And I just like I said, I fell in love with the listener and actually our expert in this case too. And it just made me understand humans differently. I don't know. I'd never heard loneliness described the way it was described on that show. And I think in part that was so exciting because I feel like everybody's talking about loneliness right now. Like it's every headline and, there's a crisis of loneliness and it's just like this constant conversation. But yet I don't think people dive deep enough to say like, wait, texturally, what does loneliness actually feel like to different people? And are we all talking about the same thing? And I think we did that in that episode. So it felt to me both like a beautiful human experience between the three of us, but also like we were adding to the public conversation in a way that made this show really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
I really did like that episode. I also liked both of the estranged parent episodes, which didn't really go together, but in my mind should have, because one of them was like how to like be estranged from your Toxic Dad, and the other one was How to Not Be Estranged from Your Toxic Dad. And I really liked both of those episodes because both of those listeners had different things they were trying to do. One person was like, "Kissing my dad is very difficult, but I don't want to sever my relationship with him, so how can I, you know?" And the other person was like, "I have let go of my relationship with my dad, but I don't know how to like properly grieve or mourn that because he's still around. Other people who know him are still in my life. I don't know how to deal with that." And I think both of those I really loved. I just really loved like the emotional weight and depth that we were able to find in our little sort of like hour-long conversation in both those episodes.
Yeah, I think that those were actually some of the first ones I ever listened to, Carvell, when I was like thinking about becoming the host of the show, and they had such an impact on me and seem applicable to like so far outside of parents too, like just so much complicated grief that we're all living with. Have you guys had advice that you've heard in something you hosted or something one of the other hosts hosted that you actually applied to your life and it stuck with you?
Oh, Carvell, you go first. I got to think about this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of advice from shows that I end up taking for my own life. But the one that really jumps out right now is on the first episode ever that you did, Charles, which was How to Be Funny. The expert said this thing that was like, it doesn't make sense to work on a joke over and over and over and over and over again before you say it, like, and try to make it perfect. You have to just write the joke quickly, get in front of an audience, and then go back and fix it. And as a writer, that has helped me a ton because I tend to be very careful and precise as a writer, which is part of how I do what I do. But also it can be difficult. I like have a hard time knowing when is enough workshopping, when is enough working of a sentence or of a paragraph. And so for me, just the idea that actually you have to get it done quickly first before you make it good has actually really helped my writing.
He also said
That's
we were
awesome.
allowed to lie in that episode.
I think for the purposes of telling a joke, I don't know that it was a blanket statement.
I'm just applying it to all of life. I'm Irish. I'm
like
just
it.
walking around telling better stories. It is how my mom tells stories, and she's always like, "We're Irish," and I'm like, "Mom, that's just a lie. That's not how it happened."
Yeah. But it makes the story so much better. Can I ask you, Courtney, what's a piece of advice that you've applied to your own life?
Well, profoundly practical, but we did this episode on mindful drinking that really helped me, where the expert said pick 3 nights a week and you only have 3 drinks on those 3 nights. I adjusted it for myself to be 2 nights a week, 2 drinks on those 2 nights. But it's just been incredibly simple and incredibly helpful for me.
That's those little things, like the little practical things. We had a guest on once, and we were talking to your kids about sex. And she said, you would never have one conversation with your kids about table manners and then assume that their table manners are going to be good for life, right? Instead, you have like 1,000 conversations with your kids about table manners. And she was like, sex and drugs and all of it, it's exactly the same way. You can't have that conversation once. You have to make that conversation something that happens thousands of times so that it'll really stick.
Oh, shit.
And I think about
Charles,
that all the time with my own
I'm
kids.
worried I haven't had enough table manners conversations. We definitely talked about sex a lot, but I don't know how much we've talked about table manners.
Just as long as they don't have sex at the table, they're good to go.
Good
That's
point.
pretty much
Okay.
That's true.
So far,
as long
so
as they
good.
know how to spoon, even if they don't know which spoon to use, it'll totally work out.
Oh,
Oh, man.
Well, Charles, thanks for creating this thing.
Thank you for taking it over so well.
It's a real treat. And thank you, Carvell, for being in it with me.
Yeah, same.
All right. And now to mark our 5-year anniversary, we're going to play our very first episode, How to Be Funny, featuring comedian Gary Gulman, a pastor from Oklahoma, and of course, our founding father, Charles Duhigg. We'll see you next week.
I killed at my father's funeral.
Really?
And then the rabbi went on after me and tried to do some time. And I said, Rabbi, you never want to follow the headline. And that got another laugh. I mean, I destroyed at my father's funeral.
Welcome to How To. I'm Charles Duhigg. Each week on this show, we talk to listeners like you who are trying to figure out how to solve one of life's problems, like how to withstand pain, or how to fire a bad employee, or how to find your soulmate. Then we track down an expert and we get their advice and we see if it helps. On today's episode, we're tackling a question that all of us at some point try to answer. How to be funny. We got interested in this after hearing from this guy in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, named Aaron Kirkpatrick.
I'm a 35-year-old pastor at a Church of Christ in Oklahoma. I get up in front of about 250 people every week to preach, and humor is, I think, a central part of that, or at least I want it to be.
Aaron wants to know how to be funny because he thinks that humor and being entertaining, it can help him reach more of his congregation.
I want people when they show up to enjoy the experience and to engage every part of their emotions, including humor.
You know this feeling, right? Humor gets people focused on you and it keeps them interested in what you're saying. But being funny is really hard to do well. Are there rules for writing the perfect joke? What have all those comedians figured out that makes them so compelling to watch? And because Aaron is a pastor and he's this nice, optimistic, sunny guy, I turn to the most logical place for advice. A Jewish New York comedian who makes jokes about his clinical depression.
Duloxetine, mirtazapine, sertraline, Effexa, Celexa, Zyprexa. At one point, my doctor said, let's just try drugs that rhyme. Thank you, Dr. Seuss.
Gary Gulman has been performing in comedy clubs for 25 years and has a brand new HBO special called The Great Depression. We'll hear all about his long, winding path to the comedy mountaintop after this quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey listeners, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. AI is moving so fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Welcome to Dear Artie, an advice column from SAP, where we tackle the tricky questions at the intersection of AI and business. Here's our expert, the technology futurist, Ian Kahn.
Hi, I'm excited to dive into today's question.
Dear Artie, the supply chain has been a friend and foe to my company. Can AI make us more resilient? Signed, Supply Chained to Uncertainty.
Hey Supply, here's how AI in the supply chain can help. AI can massively automate data analytics and understand the movement of your goods. AI can point out weak links, market demand trends, optimal logistics, and other important aspects that impact the top and bottom lines for the business. Take the example of a large grocery chain that has hundreds of vendors spread through the country. In some cases, you may need to reroute shipments to other stores, such as in the case of fresh produce, a good that can go bad very fast. Managing such a supply chain is heavily dependent on the data provided, and AI can help optimize this information so that your supply chain works at its optimal levels.
Embrace AI with confidence. Head to sap.com/AI to learn more.
Gary Gulman is what you might call a comedian's comedian. Patton Oswalt, in fact, once said, if he could only steal one joke in this entire world, he would plagiarize from Gary. But Gary says his career didn't really start so well. He still remembers the first time he got up on a stage to perform stand-up way back in the early 90s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like it was yesterday. It's so crazy.
So tell me, who were you at that point? Like,
okay, by day I was an auditor for what is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. Okay,
like always known as fertile territory for comedians. So how old were you when you get up on that stage? You're living in Boston at that point?
Yeah, I was living in Boston with my mom, and I was 23. It was open mic night. You had to bring either 3 or 4 friends to get on stage, which I thought was reasonable.
Gary says that most of his first show was terrible. It was just awful. The jokes didn't land at all. The audience wasn't responding. It felt like the night was going to be a total disaster.
Even the crickets were tugging at their ties, and they didn't even make noise. The crickets were silent. And if you had taken a poll of my mind at that time, I would have said, "Oh, okay. Oh well, this isn't going to work out." And then I went into my next joke, which was an impression of Robert De Niro, and they loved it.
Really?
They loved it, and they laughed and applauded, and I was never the same after that. I was addicted.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Everything in my life, and I'm exaggerating, of course, but let's say that most of the things in my life since that night have been geared to becoming a better comedian.
Well, and as you know, today this guy's going to be calling in asking for advice about how to be funny.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about, if I had a tape of you side by side, your first performance versus 3 years in when you finally have that confidence,
right?
What would be different? What did you learn to do?
Well, after you've learned how to swing a baseball bat and you've swung it hundreds of times, it's smoother. There's nothing from my first 2 years of comedy that made it to my first television appearance, which was 6 years in.
Huh.
Everything else, I would say it's useless. It's except for the fact that it was so useful because it got me on stage every night to become a better comedian. I compare it to music where you need to learn the scales before you can play.
So Gary spent years learning how to play his instrument. And eventually, he started getting gigs on late night TV, including on Conan O'Brien, where one performance in 2016 became an internet sensation.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to recommend a documentary to everyone, and then I'm going to go. It's about the men and one woman who abbreviated all 50 states down to 2 letters. All you have to know for this is that we have 50 states in America, and they each have a 2 capital letter abbreviation. But that wasn't always the case. Up until, I want to say 1973, and so I will. Up until 1973, every state had its own length of abbreviation, and it was chaos. Like Massachusetts was MASS period, Florida was FLA, Utah was Utah. They just dropped the H, not much of an abbreviation.
So take me step by step. How did you come up with that joke?
I mean, I first had the premise, which is, a lot of states start off with the same first 2 letters.
That just comes into your mind one day?
Yes.
Like sort of
Yes. And the first part of it was the guys trying to abbreviate the states, and they immediately come into trouble after the first state.
They started off, they thought it was going to be easy because Alabama lulled them into a false sense of security. They said, Alabama, AL, holy crap, this is easy. We're going to finish before they stop serving breakfast in the hotel restaurant.
And then
the boss said,
and then there was nothing. There was nothing. And every once in a while, I'd pull it off the shelf and rework it and add a line. But I could never find an ending or structure to that joke. And then maybe 18 years later, all of a sudden, documentaries were about small things. They were only about Hitler forever. And then all of a sudden I saw this documentary about Helvetica. And I wrote a joke about the documentary about Helvetica.
Here's Gary's first rule for how to be funny. Focus on the small things. Novices like me, we tend to look for these big, exaggerated topics to joke about. But the funniest stuff often comes from the most mundane parts of life.
One night I said, what if I did this thing that never works? The abbreviation thing. What if I try this and tell the people it was a documentary? In between the first time I got on stage and that night, I had learned an important thing in comedy, which is it's okay to lie.
It's okay to lie. You can lie about
anything as long as it helps the joke.
There's something called artistic license, which I had never understood, and I had never heard it applied to jokes, and that changed everything. And so I said, I'm going to lie and tell them that this is a documentary, thinking that part of the funny would be them figuring out that this isn't real.
Right.
But I still get emails and tweets, hey, where can I find that documentary about the abbreviation?
And then one guy said, oh, I hope they have an omelet station. Just for context, the omelet station had just been invented.
And then you go into this long, mini story about the omelet chef.
And this other guy said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with the omelet station because I feel like the omelet chef resents you. Like, he didn't want to be the omelet chef. Nobody dreams of being an omelet chef. He wanted to be the chef. And now instead of giving the orders, he's taking the orders from your stupid wife and your ugly kids. And I think one day he's going to snap, and I don't want to be there when it happens. And then the boss said, guys, I hate to be a nudge, but could we get back to abbreviating the states? We still have 49 left. And apologies were made and an understanding was reached, and they got back to abbreviating. They said, what's next? They said, Alaska. Everybody cool with AL? But somebody caught it.
You have to make people forget that Alabama was AL, and then remind them that Alabama was AL. But the interesting thing about the joke in between that is that it was from 20 notebooks prior to that. I could never make a joke about the disgruntled, hostile omelet chef I had on vacation one time that I totally identified with and totally got it, why she was so miserable. To the point where I loved omelets and I wouldn't go to the omelet chef because she was so surly.
The next rule is, once you have a mundane idea, push it to an extreme. And then get it in front of an audience as fast as you can to see if it's actually funny.
I always tell comedians at every level, don't spend 2 hours writing this joke that you've never tried out on stage before. Write down 2 or 3 sentences that you have confidence that you think may get a laugh tonight.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then if that premise works, then I'm off to the races.
So what's next? Arizona, AI, there we go, we're back on track. Next, Arkansas. Shit. No, we'll come back to it. It's not going to happen again. What's next? California, CA. There we go. Next, Colorado, CO, Momentum, Connecticut. We are screwed.
Because it's so hard to get a new joke to work. It's the hardest thing in stand-up comedy. It literally drove me mad for years.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it really contributed to my eventual hospitalization. I'm not exaggerating. I was in the hospital for depression and anxiety, and part of it was writer's block. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are chemicals involved as well, but I know that part of the thing when I was going through that was just despair over not being able to. It was almost right after that abbreviations joke too, which may have been coincidence, but it was also like, I'm never gonna write another good joke. It took me 20 years to write that one.
That's fascinating. That
I went crazy. Yes.
Yeah. Because you felt like that joke was so good, or because
no, because I also thought it was really, really flawed, and I also felt that I had blown it, and I cringe when I watch it. So that really bummed me out. It was the best joke I had. I kind of choked, I felt, and how am I going to come up with another one?
People said, how are you going to abbreviate will not use a single L? And he said, watch me. Are you saying I won't be able to do it? I just did. Thank you very much, everybody.
So Gary's actually being kind of tough on himself here because people love this joke. In fact, they adore it. It's all over the internet. But let's say he did blow it. That actually leads us to another rule. If you try a joke and it bombs, that's totally okay. In fact, that could be great.
I'll never forget for my bar mitzvah, my mom took me to see Johnny Carson, and he stumbled through a joke. He made fun of it in the moment, and then at the commercial break, he talked about it again, and it humanized him. And just by acknowledging the fact that a joke bombed, you can get laughs, and you can make everybody really, really comfortable with you by taking a moment to say, wow, that sounded much better in my head, or whatever it is that you want to say, and it's an honest moment, and it's so endearing.
Okay, here's the next rule. Be self-deprecating and honest. And finally, Gary says, find an easy crowd, like a wedding or some other kind of ceremony.
I killed at my father's funeral.
Really?
And then the rabbi went on after me and tried to do some time. And I said, Rabbi, you never want to follow the headline. And that got another laugh. I mean, I destroyed at my father's funeral, and we had it was a nice tribute and everything like that. But it was I always say a funeral. I mean, you can really. There's so much tension.
So number one rule I'm hearing you say is find funerals to try and practice your stand-up up. So we don't have a rabbi, but as I mentioned, we do have a pastor. When we come back, we'll find out what happens when Jesus, Pastor Aaron, and a Jewish comedian walk into a studio.
First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
This episode is brought to you by Defender. For those who embrace the impossible, the Defender 110 is up for the adventure. This iconic vehicle has been redefined with a thoroughly modern design. The exterior is reimagined with compelling proportions and precise detail, and the interior is built with robust materials and integrity. The Defender capability is legendary, whether you're facing off-road challenges or harsh weather conditions. Built for the modern explorer, the Defender 110 lets you go further and do more, and cargo capacity means more room for your gear. To drive the Defender is to explore with greater confidence. Powerful innovations like the intuitive driver display and award-winning infotainment system keep you connected. Innovative camera technologies deliver unobstructed views and effortless maneuvering. Ready for a wide range of adventures, the Defender family features the two-door Defender 90, the Defender 110, and the Defender 130, which seats up to 8. A vehicle made to go further, the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA/Defender.
Making everyone happy on vacation isn't easy, but you know what is? Going to Aruba. All you have to do is walk out your door to find pristine pools, relaxing white sand beaches, and an island teeming with outdoor activities that'll put a smile on any face. You won't just feel great, you'll all feel great, filled with a calmer, more peaceful vibe that radiates Aruba's warmth. And the best part is, it never fades. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your family trip at Aruba.com.
Hello?
Hey, Aaron, Charles Duhigg, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm here with Gary Gulman. Gary and I called Pastor Aaron Kirkpatrick to see if we could help him figure out how to inject more humor into his weekly sermons. Okay, so tell me about a time when you tried to be funny and it did not work.
You know, I do my best to ban those jokes from my mind. Sometimes that's because maybe it's a cultural reference that my 50, 60, 70-year-old members might not get. You know, I've learned to reference the Beach Boys more and Justin Bieber less if I want to get a laugh from them. But I will have those kind of jokes I'll tell off the cuff because they just come to me in the moment, and those are the ones most likely to fall flat.
And I want to work through with you like a particular joke. But before I do, let me just ask one other thing. It's interesting to me that you reached out to us, right? You're a pastor. Why do you feel like you need to be funny?
So I think that there's a couple different reasons. I heard somebody say a couple of years ago that in a post-religious culture, that comedians are prophets and are preachers. And so I think people go to listen to comedians now for a lot of the reasons that maybe they went to church before, right? To help us to look ugly things and scary things in the face and then give us hope, give us a story that's bigger than that. I also think that comedy is a bit of a Trojan horse. And so if you can make people laugh it gives us all a moment just on a neurological level where we all kind of relax. It's like our guard goes down a little bit. And to me, that's extremely powerful, because if we're not changing what we do, if we're not open to considering a life change, then to me, I mean, what's the point?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's workshop really quickly. I imagine you have a sermon coming up.
I do.
So tell me the joke that you're working on right now. Like what's in your head? Let's work through a joke with Gary and see if we can't make it funnier.
Okay. So here's what I'm working on right now. There's this story in the New Testament about this guy named Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus is a tax collector who is someone who is absolutely hated at the time, right? So I'm talking about this guy, and he has this interaction with Jesus, and Zacchaeus is described as someone who's very small. He's very short. Everything about your life says that we should judge you from the outside, until he meets with Jesus, and then everything changes in the way that he lives his life. So they tell a story where people are supposed to laugh at this guy, and at the end you go, oh no, this is the guy you're supposed to learn from. Like, that's a wonderful comedic trick. At the same time, I don't want to tell this story in a way that causes people to laugh at all the things that would be inappropriate for us to laugh at. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, I think your instincts are right. As I think about it, I'm thinking there are probably children in your audience, and the last thing you want them to think is that it's okay to make fun of people with dwarfism. But as a comedian, the things I kept thinking of were being tall in I don't know the timing, but I want to say, if Jesus referred to it as 31 in the year of me, that I think that would get a laugh. Or just tall was probably 5'7". Like, these were very short people. So you could say something to the effect that Jesus was an extraordinarily tall man of that age. He was 5'9" or something like that. And I think that might get a laugh.
The thing Gary says about Jesus' height, that's a total lie. Gary doesn't know how tall Jesus is. Nobody knows. But the lie is funny, right? The rule works.
The biblical text is actually amazing at the way that they pepper these stories with these, both interesting and funny little facts.
Yes,
For
and
me,
subtle.
someone trying to communicate a timeless message, millennia later, if I'm trying to create not a story that's funny, but a canned joke, like your, in the year of me kind of joke, which is hilarious, is there a way of thinking that helps you get there?
Is there a type of thinking that helps you get there? That's a good question. One of the lenses I use to look at the world is through that of a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old, but with the words and the vocabulary and the insight and awareness of irony of an adult. I think you can find a lot of humor in that. It works for me like gangbusters.
That's awesome.
The other thing I was going to suggest was that there are things in your church that you walk by every day and nobody comments on, but if you were to comment on them, they would get a laugh. Just some observational humor.
Remember, focus on the small things and then push them to an extreme.
I don't know if you have a better parking spot than parishioners, but even acknowledging that could be very funny. And if that was if secretly that was the only reason you wanted this position was to have the parking space because you were sick of walking. And yeah, I mean if you ever want to hire me as a writer.
And then the next rule: get in front of an audience.
When I gave a eulogy at my father's funeral, I told stories very specific, family. My father would start every story with "Stop me if you've heard this one before," because he was 89 years old. We'd heard every story, but he would start every single one. "Stop me if you've heard," and we never would because we loved the stories. And so I started my eulogy with "Stop me if you've heard this one before," and my brothers who. Up until that day, we had been estranged for years. I didn't add this part. We hadn't talked in years, but I wanted to speak at my father's funeral, and I opened with that, and they laughed, and I think it was Victor Borger who said the shortest distance between two people is laughter, and it thawed an icy estrangement very quickly.
Well, so I was just going to say, here's kind of where I think there's a joke here, kind of doing your method of, stepping out of your own shoes and finding the joke from someone else's perspective. I have a couple of my kids in the audience, and I think that the idea of explaining what a tax collector is to a child who has no idea of what taxes are
Right.
is potentially really funny.
Yes.
I think there's a joke there. How do I get to it? How would you do it?
Well, the thing I think of is the idea that it would be so painful if instead of them just taking it out of your check, which is the case in most people's lives, they take it out of your check. If somebody knocked at your door and asked for a third of your bags of money or however you're keeping your money or whatever your money is back then, whatever the bartering terms. I used to have this joke about how old my father was. The teacher asked me to go home and ask, who was president when he was your age and what was the price of bread? And I said, the president was Julius Caesar and the price of bread was a chicken. and so I think that would get a great laugh, and this is the next phase of learning how to write jokes. Certain words are funny. Chicken is funnier than hen. The price of bread was a hen isn't as funny as the price of bread was a chicken. Chicken is a funny word because it has a "k" sound in it. And I know this sounds crazy, but there are words that start with "b," "p," or "k," and they are funnier, and nobody can explain why.
There's another rule. There's a lot of rules, it turns out.
That is like the secret that you should get the first day of comedy college is that "b," "p," "k," cupcake, Kit Kat is funnier.
Those are funnier. So the title of this episode is How to Be Funny.
Yes.
What's the one piece of advice you would give Aaron or someone tuning in on how to be funny?
I think the answer is, and if you had to boil down all my years of comedy, is what would I laugh at? What somebody said it, be the comedian that you would want to see. So be the pastor you would want to see, Aaron. And the other thing is to follow your obsessions. You're obsessed with the New Testament, and you're going to find a lot of interesting, ironic, funny things in there, and trust these things that you find ironic or funny, and try them out so they don't laugh. It's not the end of the world. You'll survive. Give yourself permission to fail. Next to my bed, I have this quote by Beckett, which says, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better." So fail better. You're going to have a new audience next week, and you can try again.
And actually, this is probably the most important rule of how to be funny. You should try to entertain yourself, to tell jokes that you would laugh at, and then to allow yourself to be terrible again and again and again until you finally get better. Because the thing is, Gary's rules about being funny, they aren't all the rules about how to be funny. They're just what worked for him. But they work because they're about his obsessions and his memories. And most of all, because they guide him to jokes that he thinks are entertaining.
The conversation has been super helpful to me, Gary, and I really, really appreciate your time.
Oh no, it was a pleasure, because you're a thoughtful, nice man who respects comedy and loves it. So it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, if you ever come through the Oklahoma area, hit me up, man. I'd love to come watch your show live.
I would never do that. No.
And so let me just ask one other question, Aaron. You contacted us to ask how you can be funny. Did we tell you how to be funny?
We'll find out on Sunday.
I guess so.
No feedback? Good. Grab your Bible and open to the book of Luke, chapter 19. So Zacchaeus, it says, two things about him that we really need to know. Number one, Zacchaeus was, and we used to sing it in a song, what Zacchaeus was a wee little man, which I always envisioned like the Lucky Charms guy. I thought he was Irish. But Zacchaeus was very, very short, right? And when the Bible says Zacchaeus was very short, you have to realize this is at a time when the average Jewish man was 5'5". So when it says Zacchaeus is short, like to me, everybody was short, right? If they offered me a time machine to go back to the Jewish time and place here, I wouldn't do it, because there's stories in the Old Testament of what they do to people like me, right? It involves a sling and a rock. I'm not going because I'm too tall. Everybody there was short.
It's a start, right? Remember,
Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better.
Thanks to Pastor Aaron Kirkpatrick and comedian Gary Gulman. And by the way, Gary actually did perform in Oklahoma earlier this summer. Go to his website, garygulman.com, to see all of his tour dates. And look for his new HBO comedy special, The Great Depression. Do you have a question about how to do something? Anything? We're here to help. Drop us a note at howto@slate.com, and we would love to try and have you on the show. Also, we want to hear from those of you who have found the advice on our podcast to be useful to you. We want to know if you've used it in your own life or if you've recommended it to friends. If you call and you leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001, I promise you we will listen to it and perhaps even put it on the show. Again, that number is 646-495-4001. How To's executive producer is Derek John. Merritt Jacob is our engineer. Our theme music is by Hannes Brown. June Thomas is the senior managing producer of Slate Podcasts, and Gabriel Roth is Slate's editorial director for audio. Special thanks to Asha Saluja. I'm Charles Duhigg. Thanks for listening.